weeks out or after 2 weeks of hospital confinement. Sison became founding chairman of CPP in 1968 until his capture during martial law. He was detained for 8 years until the fall of the Marcos dictatorship in 1986. Sison has been staying in the Netherlands as a recognized political refugee since 1988. In other news, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas will continue its interest rate hike until the first quarter of 2023. BSP Governor Felipe Medalla told Bloomberg that policy rates will likely increase while the country's inflation remains above the government's target range. The BSP has raised its key policy rates by a total of 350 basis points this year in a bid to stabilize the peso and tame inflation that's currently at a 14-year high.
Well, as we keep saying, it's not dependent, but the likelihood of zero in the next two meetings, of course, extremely low.
Several youth groups remain opposed to the reinstitution of mandatory military training among students. In a statement, the College Editors Guild of the Philippines called the proposed National Civil Service Training Bill a de facto martial law in school. Meanwhile, the League of Filipino Students described the measure as a rebranded mandatory ROTC program. Now, under the proposed law, college students will be required to undergo military training under NCST, while ROTC will remain optional. After completing 4 semesters of civil service training, citizen cadets will be part of the National Service Reserve Corps. Now, this bill was recently passed on third and the final reading at the lower house. We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Riza Diaz. Here are some of the biggest stories we're watching around the world. A freestanding aquarium in Berlin, Germany bursts on Friday, spilling about 1 million liters of water and debris onto a major road. 2 people were injured while 1,500 exotic fish were killed. Authorities are still investigating the cause of the incident. In Malaysia, 2 people were killed while 51 others are still missing after a landslide struck a campsite on Friday. Authorities say the landslide fell from an estimated height of 100 feet above the campsite and covered almost half a hectare of land. China's abrupt end to its COVID-0 policy has sparked concerns about overloaded hospitals and the possibility of another COVID-19 variant. Let's get more details from this Bloomberg report.
The virus is really hitting all of China at once. The forecast for deaths in China reach as high as over 2 million. China's road to reopening is a little bit like that Ernest Hemingway phrase, gradually and then suddenly. The pressure has really been building for a year now since the arrival of Omicron, because that variant is just so transmissible that China's classic playbook of lockdowns, mass testing was becoming less and less effective against stopping spread. Then there were these unprecedented protests that happened at the end of November, people taking to the streets, some even calling for presidency to step down. Since then, China has basically let it rip. All of these measures now have been overturned. The only thing that remains for China is these travel curbs that we expect to be eased quite soon as well. What we're seeing right now is that really initial stage of infection that we saw in so many other countries in early 2020, where, suddenly over a couple of days, almost everybody is infected. What's really worrisome coming after this stage is when serious illness and fatalities will set in. There's a lot of concern over how the elderly especially are under-vaccinated, and they're vaccinated with Chinese vaccines, which we know are not as effective as the Western mRNAs. The health system is under strain. Officials are telling people, please don't come to the hospitals unless you're seriously sick. They're trying to prioritize the most vulnerable. The virus is really hitting all of China at once. I think we can see the same thing really happen in all major cities over the next 6 to 8 weeks. We'll start to see fatalities in around 4 to 6 weeks, and then the infection curve will start to come down. But as we've seen in so many other countries around the world, the waves keep coming back. There may be another variant, which is a really big unknown that experts are quite concerned about, because you're talking about 1.4 billion people. The more people get the virus, the more it evolves.
And those are the top stories of the hour. Join us later at 12 noon as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Riza Diaz. We are One News.